Okay. If you see me looking away, it's because I'm trying to use a second screen today, so I can keep track of everybody who's talking as well as what I'm displaying. So can everybody see the agenda?
Yep.
Okay, so I'll just introduce myself, and then as people speak, they can introduce themselves, and the others can add their affiliation to their name on the screen if you want to let other people know who you are. So I'm Roger Rail. I'm chair of CARD and chair of Residents for Safe Water, and I'm into my 28th year, I guess, watching over this Gelman site as a citizen volunteer, and trying to make sure the right thing happens for as long as it takes. Beth, you want to take the next item?
Beth Collins, the Secretary of CARD and Ann Arbor resident.
And then we go into old business. So Dan Hamill, are you ready to go here?
Well, first, can we do the vote on the minutes, Roger? Do I have, this is a board vote. If I have a motion to.
Oh, there it is.
From a
minutes. My bad.
Board
Yeah.
member to.
Yep.
That's okay.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Thank you. And anyone, let's, all in favor? Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks,
Nobody
Beth.
opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thanks a lot, Beth.
You're welcome. Now, Roger, thanks. And I'll keep it. We're going to try to use the virtual hand raise. And I've got an eye on that. And I think it then will go in order of when you raise your hand to speak. And so then we'll kind of let Dan flow through his stuff, and we'll try to, if we find we need to stop before the discussion, maybe we do that. But I'll let you handle that, Roger, and then I'll call people off in order maybe.
Actually, yeah, I'll have Dan go through the old business, but if you see a lot of hands up, then jump in and then call on people, and we'll interrupt. If we're on a topic, it's easier to talk about it while it's hot rather than waiting till 10 minutes later and trying to review where we were. So we'll try to keep those discussions short and sweet and to the point. Go ahead, Dan Hamill. You have to unmute.
Yeah, sorry. It's still morning here. Following Roger's agenda items, the first one, the question was the Assistant AG able to get the documents and data from that are currently under the confidentiality agreement. There's no new information on that. That confidentiality agreement has not been lifted, so that data right now is not available to be released. The AG and EGLE has requested Gelman to agree to release the information, but currently is not available. It's still under the confidentiality. EGLE, and just realized too, the EGLE and the interveners during the negotiations have seen the data. The next one is the trend analysis. As I've stated, it's an ongoing. It's not on the top of the pile. There's too many other things going related to the Fourth Amended CJ, the negotiations.
What was that, hon?
As I've committed or identified in the past, that I'm hoping, I will have something in the new year. Probably more at the end of the first quarter. We will be able to start talking about the trend analysis review, which is the review of the Gelman submitted trend analysis, what we asked them to provide as a sample of a trend analysis that we will utilize to generate future sampling and monitoring reports and future information. So again, no changes to that. Look for something, after the at the end of the first quarter of next year. The status of new compliance wells is the same. Again, we, as I've been stating, we just some compliance wells under the current active third modified CJ were replaced, were properly abandoned, not replaced, properly abandoned at the, with approval, request of the Scioview development property owner, and EGLE approved that abandonment. And we have did not replace well for well right now because we are still working through the fourth amended CJ, which also has compliance monitoring wells. So we didn't want to replace and don't intend to replace them until that is fourth amended CJ is finalized, or if the court identifies an impasse or identifies that the proposed fourth amended CJ has been rejected, we will start working with Gelman to replace the compliance monitoring wells that are part of the the current third amended CJ. So again, we wanted to place compliance monitoring wells under the fourth at strategic locations related to the new criteria of the fourth amended CJ of 7.2 parts per billion. The list of monitoring wells not tested. I stated last time that I had intended to sit down with Gelman or have a meeting with Gelman and go through the list. Washtenaw County GenEcon identified 20 wells that have not been sampled in years. That's the base list that I'm going through. I have identified that of those 20 wells, 7 were identified in the current approved monitoring plan, EGLE approved monitoring plan in 2011, as no longer requiring sampling. So, there are some wells in there that were approved for no additional sampling under the third amended CJ. And also one of the wells of the 20 is the property owner has not granted new access and has asked that the well be removed. So we are working through that. As soon as I'm able to meet with Gelman to get the exact reasons for some of the other delays in sampling, I will present that to the card.
Dan, I don't interject real quick here. Can you share the list of those wells? And is there like with the list, is there like a status field or something that says why it's not being sampled or what the plans are?
Yeah, I could share that. That was an email from Jenny. So I generated my own document. I can, that's not from, I can share that 20 after this meeting. I don't have it quickly available, Roger.
That's fine. That's fine. I mean, just share it and maybe as an ongoing item.
Right. Where I've started and gone through and compared it to the monitoring plans, I have something that I can share that'll give a status of where they are. So people can see the 20 that I'm working on. So I will do that after this meeting this week.
Thanks.
Let me see where I'm at. Then we have E here. When will EGLE and the Water Commissioner do Allen Creek drain testing again? I take that that's related. The testing is the testing that we did in 2019, the 6-month investigation where we sampled Allen Creek drain manholes. Right now, we don't have plans. Haven't really talked with Evan, or we haven't talked about doing additional testing. I have sampled some selected locations that we sampled during they're not surface water sampling events because they were included historically in those events. But I don't have any information on when additional testing may be done. And again, realize that we work together at, with the Evan and Water Commissioner there, at his request of, hey, let's see what's going on and get a base sampling event. So,
Yeah, we can talk more about this on item B on your updates.
Yeah, and then item, I'll use mine, Roger, my eyeballs are going up and down here. MW 103 new results. As I pointed out last card meeting, we had MW 103S had elevated dioxane levels above 85 ppb. And so that was in October. The results in October, Gelman, the laboratory, because they were the only ones that sampled in October, was 87 to 99 parts per billion. They sampled it a couple times in October. In November, the well was sampled again, the monthly sample. I went out and split sampled with them. The EGLE laboratory results I just received them and are 85 to 92 ppb. I collected a sample and a duplicate at the time. I don't have, right now, I don't have Gelman's results on that, but the EGLE lab is 85 to 92. There is a question in the agenda there, what corrective actions are being planned. As stated previously, right now, no actions are being planned until a final decision on the fourth amended CJ is identified by the judge or by the group. Just realize that enforceable required actions are not really actually part of the third amended CJ, which is the one we are working off of. The actions that we've discussed in the past, corrective actions, were identified in a request or identification by EGLE in a compliance communication in compliance communication letters in October 2013 and April 2014. As I've stated before, those are, compliance letters. They aren't as easily enforceable as requirements actually in the CJ. And as earlier this year identified that we are not going to require something until the CJ, fourth amended CJ is reconciled, either denied or signed. Because one of the reasons is because there are corrective actions in the fourth amended CJ in that area, site investigation activities that would gather the information related to questions of the 85, greater than 85 in the MW 103S area.
Hey Dan, this is Josh Mosier with EGLE. Is it correct to say that the current third CJ does not identify any required action for this monitoring well?
Right, MW, right. It does not have any trigger or anything related to MW 103. We identified those actions in letters after.
Right, there's actions we would like them to take, but there's no enforceable action that EGLE can require. Unless something goes beyond the boundary.
Right,
So
it goes beyond the boundary. That's the key in the third amended
right.
is the zone boundary. If it can't go outside the 85, outside that boundary at concentrations greater than 85.
So
Ralph, do you want to say something?
can I ask then, are we planning on putting a well right outside the prohibition zone so we'll know that the third CJ needs to be enforced? Like somebody in Ann Arbor should be putting a well, or EGLE or somebody.
Well, we currently have a well that is right on the prohibition zone boundary, cluster MW112, and the results in those wells are in the 8 to 10 parts per billion range.
Yeah, but
right
they're
now.
not necessarily the
Sample
same elevation of screening. It shouldn't be
They-
outside the zone. It should be inside, because that's what you want to have heads up before it gets to the edge of the prohibition zone. It shouldn't be right on the edge.
CJ and the third amended and the current monitoring plans as approved after the third amended CJ. That's currently where we are. So there are, like I said, plans in the fourth amended to do additional investigation, additional wells at general area, and as in the fourth amended, that prohibition, it's proposed that the prohibition boundary be expanded to the south. So that's the current situation we are in.
Yeah, so our plan to address it was in the fourth amended consent judgment.
By drawing a bigger
That's
line.
Yep, that
based on a lower threshold of criteria. Yes. So, but there's nothing we can do at this point.
Well, there is things we can do. All right, let's go on. This is going to be covered again in his update. So
then there in G, it was I've been asked to provide a written response every month or every card meeting to the agenda items, and I'm not going to commit to that right now, Roger. We've discussed it in-house, and I'm attending the meetings. I have other responsibilities and duties, not only with Gelman, but with my other sites. So I'm not going to commit right now to provide information, a write-up of questions and answers. If you remember the last time with the EPA, we did that every
I found the,
and it kept expanding. And
hopefully you weren't looking for it.
then we move to B. Any updates on the EGLE DHHS adjusting VI numbers? There are no plans right now to adjust the VI number, VI numbers, based upon the current proposed vapor intrusion screening level is 1900. It's proposed. It has not been promulgated. The Shane Morris email that is referenced here had identified a potential screening number if certain assumptions are made of down to 29. But right now, we're not going to be adjusting that. No plans to immediately adjust any of those numbers. So that's the current status with that.
let me just ask a quick question here, Dan, on the 29. So when that is a screening limit, how long is it going to take to get that into effect? Given how long it's taken the 7.2 to be put into effect.
No, it's not. That was a screening level that was calculated out historically and put in an emergency rule, but it had some assumptions that really weren't accurate assumptions for the exposure limits. And so when the renewal came for the emergency rules, it was not included the second time through. If a lot of those assumptions to get that 29 aren't currently realistic with the current conditions. So that is why the evaluation, the proposed number was changed to 1900. So we aren't right now aren't planning unless additional information is presented to go through another evaluation to come up with a change that to the 29.
So is 1900 in effect on this site?
Well, that is it's the proposed number. There really isn't a screening number that has been approved statewide for dioxane and for vapor intrusion. So that we are just identifying the 1900 as the likely number that will be utilized when it gets approved.
And how long is it
I would like to
gonna
make
take to get that utilized?
I can't answer that, Roger.
I know we can't. Yeah. What are you going to say, Vince?
Yeah, so I think that Part 201 is a very weak Michigan environmental standard. And I think the fact that we have 29 now near the surface in the groundwater is an issue of protecting the public health. I think we have a lot of wet basements. We've talked about this in the past, a lot of wet basements on the west side. And I don't think that we are meeting Part 201 standard, which is very weak, could be a lot stronger, but even in its weak state, we are not protective, I don't think. If we have 29 part per billion, we have, pretty good evidence that 29 is an action level that should be used for further investigation for sites that are exposed. I don't think we're meeting that standard.
Thank you, Vince. Okay, go ahead, Dan.
I think that's it that I can answer. C and D are not some of the, I'm not firsthand knowledge on some of those. I can,
Okay.
can assist, as far as the one Allen Creek Drain MS4 violation, the EGLE Water Resources Division is working through that. And that's about as far as I can talk about it firsthand.
We decided to take care of that later in the agenda. But it's just old business, so all the old business gets lumped in there. But I believe EGLE's old business is completed now, and we could see if anyone wants to answer the other old business. I know Evan wanted to wait, and he joined us. Thank you, Evan. So maybe Patty wants to talk.
Hey, everyone. I guess I can just give a brief update. So the way the program works is that folks have to let us know that are in that area if they've got a wet basement, or if they've had a wet basement in the past and are interested in participating. That's the 20 that's in the agenda here. And then once we get a rain event that causes flooding in the house, they're supposed to call us. And to date, I have not had any calls for flooding the basement yet.
Beth, there's somebody in the waiting room if you want to find out who it is.
I don't see anyone in the waiting room. Patty, did anything of that other question in there about the new 49 parts per billion? Are you guys researching that more, or anything you want to add to that, or not at this time?
That would have to be somebody from the city. I've not been asked about that.
Any
I'd like to make a comment that there has been discussions at U of M with some faculty member that they are interested in testing vapor intrusion. One option we have is not to wait until there's standing water in a basement, but to test basements that are damp, that have wet walls, of water percolating up from below, making the floors wet. I think we're getting to a point now where we're seeing what I would consider a actionable event where we're having 49 part per billion. And that probably will keep going up. It's been going up ever since we started testing that. And it was a lot of work to get those tests done. They're pretty simple. They're pretty basic. And that's, probably why they're being done. We could expand on those tests and not just do the real simple tests that we got EGLE started on. But I think there are other options of, instead of just waiting for the basements to flood, because we're looking at groundwater. We're not so much interested in the runoff of rainwater. Thanks.
If I could just add very quickly, there seems to be a continual confusion about flooded basements versus damp basements. And the issue in Ann Arbor is that the groundwater is high and a lot of subterranean basements are in fact damp. They have damp walls, they have seepage, not necessarily standing water. And so the question I have is, if you're waiting for citizens to come forward with saying that they have a situation, I think it's important that the right language is used. So if you're asking for flooded basements, they may think you have to actually be stepping in puddles. And also, what kind of outreach might we be able to help with? Get the word out.
Who should coordinate that?
Yeah. Good thoughts, Rita. I can share that information with Brian.
I think it's important to coordinate that through CARD so we can help get all the parties together that have a role in that, since it's crosses jurisdictions, both both the map version of the jurisdiction and the organizational jurisdiction. So it's good that everybody at CARD have an idea to know what the latest is on investigations of that sort. So if anybody has any thoughts on that, let us know.
And I don't have any raised hands under the discussion portion now. Is there anyone that would like to ask a question before we move on?
I'm just interested in looking at basements for not just water, but also for vapor. And is there testing for that available?
That's what we're talking about, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, the program for the city, the basement sampling is that first you would go in and sample the sump water if the basement is flooded. If the concentrations in that water are above the 29 parts per billion we've been discussing, then it would move to the county for vapor sampling. The county would take care of that.
Again, you just used the term flooding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's different than damp and seepage.
Yeah.
I suppose you could have both. You could have water in the sump pump and then damp in the basement too. But how do you sample dampness?
Yeah, and that's the
Vapor.
trigger, unfortunately, for this program, is that we have to do the water first. So we have to. So the point is that the sump has to have filled enough to have gotten onto the floor. So it doesn't have to be, standing water necessarily, but if there's demonstration that the sump water has gone onto the floor, then that is what we're calling flooded. And then we have an idea that this is groundwater that we're talking about.
I'm sorry, my question is just, but not if there's no water in the basement, but is there a potential problem of vapors being in the air?
Yeah, that's not the basement sampling program, unfortunately. So that's more to Vince's point that, he'd like to see indoor air sampling.
Okay.
And then I can also answer that a little further in that 1,4-dioxane likes to stay in the groundwater, which is why they're worried about when the groundwater that enters the basement evaporates into the air for breathing. But no, dioxane, once it's in groundwater, doesn't volatilize out of the groundwater. So if you have a dry basement, you don't have to worry about dioxane vapors entering your basement.
But when you have a wet basement and the water starts to evaporate and it's contaminated, it's going to evaporate 1,4-dioxane with it.
Right. Those
And
are
so
two separate.
that's a concern we have.
Right, I was just trying to clarify for Jim. He was wondering if you have a dry
Right.
basement, not a wet basement, does he have to be
Yeah,
concerned?
thanks.
Thank you.
Ralph?
I just have a sort of a follow-up question. I'm new to this and I'm a homeowner on the west side. I live on near Forsyth, Red Oak and Vesper. I have maybe 4 times a year, I have water ground now percolating up into the basement that I have to shop back out and move stuff around. It happens, you know, after a heavy rain, maybe the next day. Based on this conversation, I would have no idea what to do. Or what, am I in this program? Am I not in this program? The water's enough that it would maybe, I have to shop back maybe a gallon of water, maybe in my whole basement. And if I don't do anything, I have to pull up a tile floor to get at it. And then it takes maybe a week to dry out. And after that, you would not have any water to sample. So, and I would imagine there's a lot of people in this neighborhood that have basements similar to this. How would you even know what to do? Or, you know, the water's only there for a couple days and you got to leave it if you're actually going to clean up, which is what I would typically do because I have a lot of stuff stored down here. How would I even know anything about whether this is in the program, not in the program? I haven't received any communications about any of this. I might be outside the plume, so it might not matter, but the point I'm making here is that to someone who's new to this, who's not coming to these meetings, they have no idea how any of this would work.
So
That's
Ralph,
not a,
so I sent letters to all the homeowners. I had to evaluate the leading edge of the plume as requested by the city. They gave me some parameters to work with that I worked within. I identified 273 homes that all received letters with a survey to help us understand if there is flooding in their basements. And then those surveys came back to me. We compiled them. Then I sent another letter and a waiver. If folks are interested in participating, they have to sign the waiver in order for us to enter their home. So there's also a website. City of Ann Arbor has a website dedicated to the basement sampling, and I completed a presentation when we rolled out the program to the public.
can you just identify quickly sort of where the border is? I live north of West Park. It's much closer to there is where the letters went out to.
Yep. So I don't know, Roger, if you've got the plume up. So it's kind of in two areas, sort of the West Park area, and along Chapin Street would be the edge on the north side, and then on the west side, on the leading edge, it's sort of what I'm referring to as the Waterway Park area. It's kind of bordered by like Washington on the north. I can't see the roads. It's just,
so that's significantly south of where I am. So that was I'm just trying to figure out generally where we're talking about. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? All right, let's go on to the updates, Dan Hamill.
The NPDES permit, as I do, I've checked with Water Resources last week or really yesterday, and there's no new information. They are still internally evaluating the NPDES permit renewal to actually generate a new permit.
So people can still
under the
comment on that,
NPDES
though, right?
program. Again, they haven't identified a comment period officially. Several of the Water Resources, I know you've had interaction with some of the Water Resources people that have come to CARD meetings, but they have not moved to the next step of actually setting a, identifying and releasing a draft permit for comment and scheduling a public meeting, which they have committed to CARD that they will do that prior to finalizing any NPDES permit.
Okay. And there's nobody on,
Dan, can I ask, well, I saw a Cindy with EGLE. I didn't know, she's not with Water Resources?
She's in compliance and
Okay.
enforcement. She's one of my team, one of my coworkers with me, working on the
Okay,
project.
thank you.
So,
Hi, Cindy, and
Hi.
So the next one is the surface water and near surface groundwater testing in West Park. I sent out I sampled the surface waters, and like I said, on October 5th and 7th, sent out the actual laboratory reports to the people, and have sent them to be posted. I've sent them to the CARD group, key people in the CARD group, and I think Beth, you sent that out or made that available. That information was done a couple of weeks ago. This is where we identified, as Vince has been identifying, the 49 ppb in the Allen Creek drain in West Park there, in the manhole in the West Park area. We identified 28 ppb at Chapin Street manhole, but the rest of the surface water, areas were in the same range as they had been historically. I added one at the request of CARD, Vince. I added one new location. I called it the storm grate on 8th Street. It just was the adjacent storm grate on the west side curb that I sampled. That was the first time sampling of that storm grade. It was 11 ppb. That is not the same location as identified in the Allen Creek drain investigation on 8th Street. That was a manhole. It's within 15 feet or so of that manhole that was sampled during that 2019 investigation. So I just want to make that clear. That is not the same location as in that investigation.
so it's not this location here.
I don't know. I don't have it on screen.
It's not on screen, Roger.
Oh, I didn't hit the share yet. Sorry. Maybe I.
No problem. But while he's doing that, like I said, the rest of the locations, we're not, we're in the range of what they have historically been when I've sampled. And I did, some key notes, the West Huron Drive, Honey Creek up at West Huron Drive. That's right before it goes into the river, the Huron River, was at 1.2 ppb this time. That has been sampled a handful of times. I just started that last year to start sampling that. The two locations that were in the Huron River, one was on the bank, what's identified as HCHR, the Gelman samples monthly. I sampled that same location. It was non-detect. And I took a sample from the bridge crossing the Huron River, and that I've done that a couple of times in the past, and that also was non-detect as it was historically.
Oh, you're talking about the Foster Bridge down here.
Yeah, there's a couple names that are always thrown out. I always get them confused. The Foster Bridge is North Maple Ridge.
Some people call it Maple
Foster Bridge,
but Maple curves around here. This really Foster Street Bridge. That's the name everybody calls it here. But the point is that the sampling. Excuse me, Dan. The sampling here at the exit point at the mouth of Honey Creek wasn't sampled there originally. It was sampled where Gelman sampled for bromate in the river. they were supposed to be sampling for bromate here, but when you went out with them, they were sampling here, half-mile
Yes.
down in the river.
Yes.
And we never have heard back from the city whether or not that's an issue, because that was, the location was specified in the 2006 agreement with the city, between Gelman and the city, to sample at this location for bromate, not all the way down in the river. So I still haven't heard.
I'm sampling that location. It's identified as the Honey Creek at West Huron Drive.
Right.
So I sample up at the bridge location along West Huron Drive, and I've been doing that for, I do have a handful of samples there. This last time, like I said, it was at 1.2 ppb, and it's been in the 1 to 2 plus range for the handful of samples that I've collected. We started at 2 years ago, I believe,
Yep.
year and a half. So
I just want to make it clear to people that we asked EGLE or DEQ to do these tests in the different creek locations that are below ground when there was somewhat of a drought condition with low flow from rainwater. And they were able to do that, generally speaking, which is good. And that there's high flows in a lot of these locations that they're testing, and those high flows during a drought would indicate to us that that's probably groundwater. And so that was an easy way to do these near surface shallow groundwater tests. So just to let you know.
And just to let everybody know that, I post the laboratory reports that I receive related to any of the sampling that I collect and send to the EGLE lab. I post them on our webpage under the recent analytical tab. I also then put them into the database, the access database that I maintain and post for the Gelman site and post on the webpage. So the access database is an easy way to click on and see, historic 1,4-dioxane results at a specific location. But I have to add the location. For example, I don't have the Storm Grate H Street added yet. I'm in the process of doing that, and that'll be on the access database in the near future.
Yeah.
Beth,
Can I stop while we're on this location? James Demore has his hand raised, and then Commissioner Sue Schenk asked about this sampling in the river thing, and it sounds like we asked the city where they wanted it and stuff like that. I want to make sure this is followed up on for at least next month. And what are the questions and that we've had about this sampling location?
we're talking about up here at Honey
Yeah.
Creek, Huron River, right? Well,
So,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. I don't know if Sue Schenk wants to talk, but I guess the question is, are they now sampling where the correct location for sampling should be taken at the mouth of the river for both bromate and, not where it's diluted 100 feet downriver?
Well, it's not 100 feet, it's half mile.
Yeah, even worse.
Of the outlet for the Honey Creek, not downstream of that.
Yeah, we know that Dan Hamill is sampling at both locations for dioxane, as well as on the Foster Bridge. What we don't.
Well, what was the question about the city of Ann Arbor?
Well, the city in their 2006 agreement, the company was supposed to have been sampling for bromate here at the mouth of Honey Creek. Instead, they've been sampling apparently down here. We only found out about that through card meetings. As Dan said, when he went out to do the sampling for where Honey Creek enters the Huron River, he went down here and sampled down here because that's where the company had been sampling. Is that right, Dan?
Yes, I went along to split sample. And so that's the HCHR location is the one
Yeah.
where the hand's at right now, down there.
Yeah,
So
and-
that's sampling. I mean, I don't have firsthand knowledge. You have your other triangle up right next to the river, the confluence there. Not along the bridge, right there. That is, I believe, some of the original location where they had started some sampling, and they ran into access problems with the railroad and physical access problems getting back to that location. So,
Well, plus this is backed up. I mean, this is not really Honey Creek anymore. This is now part of the Huron River because of the water levels in here.
I'm just again.
So where you're
I'm
sampling
only-
is actually a better place to sample what's in Honey Creek.
Right. I sample from the bridge. I dip my sample, sampling the bottles with a dipping rod from the bridge down into the middle of Honey Creek there.
Now, it may be good if they sampled both places to see how much of, but you know it's going to be diluted once it gets into this larger body of water here.
I'm just identifying what I was told. You know, they did have railroad access problems.
Yeah.
Railroad owns that.
Well,
And,
I'm glad we were
actual-
able to find that out at card meetings. Otherwise, we would have never known that. Sue, what was your question, Sue?
Thank you, Roger. My question was just whether Dan was sampling at the place where the Huron River Bridge, the Huron River Drive Bridge goes over Honey Creek. And my understanding from the conversation is that he is sampling in that spot, and I am glad to hear that.
Yeah. I mean, when I sample surface waters, that's where I sample it from. The HCHR sample that Gelman does I believe they have to do it multiple times a week. Is the other location that Roger, as I understand it, the other location. So and they do bromate there. They don't do 1,4-dioxane. They're not required to do 1,4-dioxane. They do bromate, and that's related to the NPDES permit. So I have also sampled that location for 1,4 when I do the surface waters, and then I go down to the east and do it right in the middle of the river across the bridge there.
Yeah.
North Bridge.
So if I can interrupt really quickly, Jason Morgan just posted a note saying he's going to duck out in a minute. And before he leaves, I think that we should express our gratitude for his leadership on the county commission, and maybe ask him to talk about the resolution that he has on the agenda tonight.
That's fine. If he has to leave, let's have him talk right now. If he wants to.
Oh, here I am. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, my internet's a little spotty here today. Thanks, Jack. This is Jason. Yeah, I have on our agenda for this Wednesday a resolution to finally ask for EPA Superfund designation. I know there are some that are concerned that we need to wait and see what happens in January with the meetings with the judge. I understand those concerns, but I think all of you would probably agree that we've given the lawsuit and the legal effort plenty of time to work at this point, and it just hasn't. It is my hope that we will finally at least pursue these parallel paths of, we have to continue to fulfill our obligations on the legal side of things, but I think it's past time that we at least ask for EPA Superfund designation to get that process started. I know all of you were asking us to do that a long time ago, and I think we've thoroughly tried everything that we possibly humanly can to get Gelman to agree to something in regard to a settlement with the consent judgment, and they just aren't willing to agree to something that's good enough for us. So that's my hope. I'm not, to be honest, I'm really not sure whether this will pass on Wednesday night or not. I'm not sure if there's a support to do it. As many of you know, I have wanted us to get to a consent judgment if possible, to get something that would be satisfactory to our cleanup levels. And all of you have told us very clearly that this consent judgment is not that. And I would agree with you. And so I'm hopeful that we'll do this, but I don't know if the support is going to be there or not on Wednesday night.
Well, people can call in and voice their support at public comment. I would encourage that.
Kathy Griswold, did you want to ask some or add something? And then James Damore still has his hand raised too. So
Yes, I don't see my video, but that's okay. Can people see me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. I want to thank everyone. I am just so appreciative of all of the community advocacy, of all of the community expertise. We would not be in the position we're in today if it wasn't for community members. And I believe, and Ralph McGee laid this out in a very thoughtful manner. Pardon me?
Go ahead.
Ralph laid out this strategy. We need to move forward with the EPA as a strategy in trying to achieve a reasonable consent judgment. And we discussed this at a recent city council meeting. We need to have parallel paths, if not more than two paths moving forward. And so I would really encourage all of the interveners to move forward with the EPA path as quickly as possible so that we can use that as leverage. So again, thank you to everyone.
Thanks, Kathy. James, did you had your hand up? James Damore?
I had my hand up on another matter, but just quickly to Jason, yes, thank you for your leadership on this, and I hope the resolution will pass tomorrow night. I think by having the county weigh in, having all the parties weigh in, as Kathy said, I think that will be a good nudge to move Danaher in the right direction. If we still wanted to pursue the question of CJ, we can still push the process forward. So Jason, thank you for your leadership on this. I want to ask something else to Dan, but if you want to talk to Jason, I'll step back for a minute.
You can always ask him in the chat directly and then bring it up in the discussion part.
he had an NPDES permit question, I think. But
yes.
Does anyone, before Jason has to go, anything else?
Well, thanks everyone. Sorry to have to hop out. I teach a class on Tuesdays at 11, so gotta go do that.
Okay, maybe go back, jump back into the EGLE updates. We don't think we finished with item C,
Well,
did we?
Yeah, can I just ask before we go back into the sampling questions, Dan, you mentioned and DPS permit. Do you have any idea of the timetable when they're going to get done with this? I mean, we were talking about this in 2019.
No, I don't have. They have not identified a time frame. I check in each month before I come to the card meeting to see if has been some changes. And I will, but I don't have any firsthand knowledge of a timetable. And they have been at card meetings and have said that it is a process. And again, they are overwhelmed with renewals and new permits, and with the staff level and the current situation of not working in the office, working remote. So I can't provide anything more than that.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, Dan, maybe item C then on the updates.
what is the EGLE going to do to require the polluter to take immediate action, to the increase in groundwater and surface water, PPB in West Park? Again, we really don't have a regulatory authority to require an immediate action related to an increase in 1,4-dioxane in the West Park area. I mean, they are in compliance with the third amended CJ, the compliance. They are allowed to have concentrations in the West Park area. It's within the prohibition zone, as long as those concentrations don't go outside the prohibition zone greater than 85 parts per billion, then that would be a non-compliance and an enforceable non-compliance issue. The other issue is the new GSI, that regulation for 1,4-dioxane, new GSI criteria is 280, and the information that we have, in that area, that it's not that the 280 venting to surface water. So we don't really have at this point a straightforward regulatory authority to require some actions. Now, the fourth amended CJ has some investigation activities down in that area that will answer several of the correct questions related to different exposure pathways, or at least it's a start of gathering information to see if those questionable exposure pathways are really valid in that area. But we don't have anything right now that regulatory authority to force an immediate forcing immediate response to
Dan Bicknell?
Well, remember, Dan, though, there is this municipal stormwater MS4 permit, and Gelman is not allowed to have any dioxane above background enter the Allen Creek drain underneath that MS4 permit. So that does allow an immediate halt to that. And this has been going on, as you know, for over a year and a half. That has been documented, and it continues to rise. So there is a state MS4 permit that should be used to halt that infiltration into the Allen Creek drain. It's definitely a violation.
I mean, I can identify what, again, has been said by the water resources people that are handling the MS4 people in the water resources group. That, again, the fourth amended CJ was a plan, which they are, which is an acceptable short-term measure of of moving toward compliance with a MS4 violation. So right now, that is currently what's up. There's a reevaluation that's going on related to the rejection votes of the fourth amended at this point from local stakeholders. So I don't have any additional information on that, Dan. Again, the MS4, the Washtenaw County works with the MS4 people in EGLE to go through that,
Yeah, but there is the point is, please, is that there has been for over a year and a half illicit discharge into Allen Creek drain because of that MS4 permit violation, and the state has not taken action to abate that. And it's not contained in any proposed fourth amended CJ. Thank you.
We have Evan with us. Did you want to jump in, Evan?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Thanks for the invite, or making sure. I certainly recognized it would be a good meeting to attend. I appreciate that EGLE does give us a heads up when there's these unpleasant surprises. 2020 is the year that keeps on giving, I guess. So the agenda says immediate action. I'm going to start with that. So Kristen Schweighofer beat me to the punch. As soon as we saw the test result information, Kristen caught the email first and forwarded it along to legal counsel in case that's a useful thing for this January hearing. I think we all understand, though, that it's unclear where the January hearing is at and how the judge is going to view everyone going after EPA. But nonetheless, we wanted to make sure that our attorney was aware of that. And I'll get back to that in a minute. I also wanted to attend today just to hear if there had been any resolution from EGLE as far as an approach to, as Mr. Bicknell said, the MS4 item. And I also plan to chase down Dan and pin down the exact locations on 8th Street, because that is a little bit of a concern, right? That's the southern edge of the plume, or closer to the southern edge of the plume, in areas where we know we've had issues or problems. And I think we need to continue sampling, but that's an observation. I don't know that that's, to me, that's not really an action, right? That doesn't solve a problem. That just helps you better understand, you know, what's your best approach. So I think 8th Street, we certainly want to be sampling both the old location and the new location to figure out, has the old location we were always sampling kind of stayed the same, or has it also shot up? Dan Hamill mentioned to me, we only spoke very briefly because he was trying to make sure everybody was aware this information was coming out here right before Thanksgiving. And he mentioned that the location he sampled on 8th Street was a fair amount deeper and had steadier flow than he recalled in the past. Dan, correct me if I'm paraphrasing correctly.
It's a shallower location. It's the storm grate adjacent on the side of the road. So shallower than the manhole that we sampled during our investigation in 2019. There's a 8th Street location in 2019 report investigation. So it was the manhole out in the middle of the road. And this was a grate adjacent to that, to the west 15 plus feet, right along the curb. So, and it was shallower, was coming in from pipes shallower. So that's, you know, I didn't go anything further than that visual, you know, noticing that visually.
So that site had a lot of flow even during very dry conditions. That's why I asked that to be tested.
Yep. Yeah, there's certainly high surface groundwater there. That's Conan Smith's house there, just to the northwest. I just got off the phone with him prior to this to make sure that he was aware. So, and it is pretty common for those gratings along the curb to be higher than the manhole itself. That's typically to pick up localized surface flow, whereas the manhole itself is, you know, as you can kind of see on the drawing, set to pick up. It's at a lower elevation because it's kind of carrying the mainline pipe through. So I will also follow up with Dan on that to make sure we're understanding everything correctly. Thanks, Dan. I think I was saying that the wrong way, although I pictured it the way you described. So those are three things. I'd like to jump back though. First off, Gelman has created this problem. Gelman is the bad guy here. Danaher Corporation owns Gelman, for the record. I think we all know that, but I'd like to make sure that's commented anywhere where this is going to end up in the media. This is about Danaher Corporation and their subsidiary Gelman. That said, going back to what Dan Bicknell was talking about the MS4s, Dan put out a very comprehensive summary that wound up identifying the three pathways identified in EGLE internal guidance documents. So it's not necessarily codified in law. I'm not sure how, you know, let's say enforceable it is, but there's three things that EGLE has as options when the remediation division that Dan works for and the water quality division that issues these municipal separated storm sewer system. That's the S4 part, the MS4 permits. Those folks can get together, the remediation folks and the permitting folks, and there's three potential remedies. Now, two of them I don't think are really remedies, but they are available options for remediation and permitting to agree on for the polluter. Those two options that I don't think solve or eliminate or remediate the problem are they can issue an NPDES permit that says it's okay to continue having this pollutant in the storm drain. And of course, they would have to have justification and some logic path, I assume, to say why that's okay to have a pollutant when the MS4 program is I'll call it a zero tolerance program. There aren't thresholds. Any contaminants are supposed to be removed. However, in the situation where there's a remediation, a site remediation going on, they recognize that sometimes groundwater does get into various pipes. So again, one option is to issue an NPDES permit to say it's okay for that to continue happening. And I'm guessing that no one here is particularly interested in that. Another option is they can require the polluter to put a impermeable lining inside the pipe. I love the idea that that extends the life of a 100-year-old pipe. But again, that doesn't do anything to keep the water from flowing to the river. All that means is it'll get there a little slower through the trench that the pipe is in. Most pipes, mainline pipes like Allen Creek or sections of Mallett's Creek that are enclosed generally follow a historic creek bed. So these are the pathways, the paths of least resistance, or the preferred pathways that I think folks have talked about in the card group previously. So the water is going to continue along that way. So again, I like sewer lining as a matter of course to help tighten things up. But on the other hand, it is kind of good for people that there is a pathway for groundwater to get into Allen Creek, because historically, if you don't have a storm pipe that's basically leaky and helping keep the groundwater low, the groundwater can build up a little bit. And again, the water is going to continue, the contaminated water is going to continue going to the river. So that kind of leaves the third option is one that's more of a remedy to say the polluter needs to, as Mr. McNell suggested, needs to take care of that and stop it from getting into the pipe at all by removing the dioxane that's all around the pipe. I think we all agree that would be nice. But again, this is an internal guidance document. EGLE could agree internally on any of those three pathways, and I'm not sure how that plays into all of the legal process. So I'm just kind of laying that out there as what it would mean. I think you can see I'm not sure if we've bound ourselves up a little bit with the consent judgment and all that kind of thing. But I agree with Mr. McNell that the MS4, that's based on a federal statute. So certainly if the EPA were to come in, I would hope they would be thinking about enforcing federal regulations as well. And it sounds like everybody is on board with the EPA coming in. Hopefully the governor's office is in agreement with that. However, to me, I would also like to point out, and I don't know that the Attorney General's representative, I don't know that Brian has come here prepared to agree or disagree, but as a layperson, when I have read consent judgment 1, 2, and 3, every single one of them is very clear that sanitary or storm drains could possibly be used for discharges, but not without the permission of the owning entity. So I feel like since 2017, so I'll disagree with Dan Bicknell a little bit that it's been more than a year and a half. We've been above zero since at least 2017 in the mainline pipe. And my office has not given approval or permission for that. So to me, that appears to be a violation of the consent judgment. So I will certainly follow up and have discussion with the remediation folks and the permit folks to talk about, have we chosen a pathway that's at least preferred by EGLE, one of those three pathways, again, lining the pipe, doing the remediation, or asking that they request an NPDES permit. Now, So I will follow up on that, and I'm happy to follow up with the Attorney General's office to see if I'm off base with this interpretation of the consent judgment. But I think it's very, very clear that the owning agency has to give permission to use the pipes for discharge, and that may not have been what was necessarily intended, but it seems like the intent has always been to continue to let the plume work its way to the river. From the Danaher and Gelman standpoint anyway, it's continued to work its way there, and nobody's been prevented. And I apologize that this is kind of lengthy, but it is a little complicated to unravel all this. The last thought I have, though, is, again, I'm reading as a layperson a consent judgment. I've asked for our legal counsel to give me feedback if I'm incorrect, or to at least show it to the judge and ask what he thinks if having dioxane in this pipe is a violation of the existing CJ. But at the end of the day, we may have bound ourselves up on enforcing existing and future CJs. It's probably not clear to any of us here at what point is the CJ no longer in effect and EPA is in charge, type of thing. So I'm not sure when we talk about immediate action being removing the dioxane from there. I just want to be realistic to say that in the short term, I don't know that I don't own a giant cork. Unfortunately, if I had a giant cork, maybe that would help, but I don't own one of those. I just can't think of any other thing that's going to happen right away that solves the problem that Danaher Corporation and their subsidiary Gelman has caused us. And I guess I'll leave it at that. Maybe there's a question or two, or maybe there's a comment from the Attorney General's office.
Yeah, we have a couple hands raised. Dan Bicknell, then Vince, then Eric Lipson. But does Brian Nagel do we want to ask questions first, or?
Yeah, let me chime in. I unmuted myself. The provisions you're looking at, Evan, are the provisions for addressing in the 3 CJs or whatever up to this point. It's addressing discharge of treated groundwater, so that Gelman would not be able to put water that's been treated into one of the sewers, whether it's sanitary or storm, without obtaining a permit, either from, like in the case of the storm sewer, you'd have to obtain an NPDES permit to do so, and also probably a permit from the county, I'm not sure. Certainly into a sanitary sewer, you'd need to get a permit from the city too. And that's what that's really meant to address, not leakage into the sewer.
Good. Thanks. Yeah, thank you, Brian. This is Dan Bicknell. That's the way I understood it as well. A couple points, please. And I want to thank Evan for his explanation. The consent judgment deals with a Michigan Part 201 regulation violation. It does not cover a municipal MS4 permit violation. They're two different things. And the consent judgment, again, does not cover this MS4 permit violation. The MS4 permit violation relates to any discharge of dioxane that infiltrates into that Allen Creek drain. That's what the drain is covered by, as this MS4 permit. And as Evan was able to explain, there's these 3 options that address this federal permit, which has been delegated to the state, which now is being managed by Washtenaw County. And the third option that Evan talked about, and I'll read it to you, it says it requires immediate treatment of the contaminated groundwater to uncontaminated groundwater levels prior to infiltrating into the storm water. And we have known, and has been documented well since August of 2019, that this is occurring. When there was a very nice survey that Water Resources and EGLE had done, that Dan and Evan had done, and it was very important for us to understand that. And as we saw recently now in this last little bit of sampling, it's increased significantly since August 2019 until October. So there is this immediate requirement in this third option. And the first option, an NPDES permit, that's not viable. That does not relate to allowing a non-point source, if you will, which we have going into that drain. An NPDES permit deals with open channel discussions, as Brian was talking about. And the other option is to, as Evan indicated, replace the line. Well, that might not be practical, as Evan had pointed out. That may cause a problem of backing up, excuse me, of the waters into people's homes and basements. So really, the only practical problem solution is to do this immediate treatment of the contaminated groundwater to make sure it doesn't infiltrate. And that can easily be done, if you will, by installing groundwater extraction and treatment wells in this area along the pipe to make sure that any contaminated groundwater is extracted before it gets into that pipe. But that has not been talked about, but that is really the most viable option. And unfortunately, it's not going to be covered in the consent judgment unless they expand the consent judgment to deal with additional regulations besides that Part 201 regulation, which would be the MS4 permit violation. So I just wanted to clarify a couple of those points, please. Thank you.
Dan, I'm sorry, I know there's other people who want to ask, but I mean, do you feel like this is something that normally EPA would be addressing? I want to make sure that we feel that way.
Well, there's three different entities, isn't there, that should deal with this. It's a federal permit, but that federal permit, and it would be covered by EPA, but the federal permit's been delegated to the state, and therefore the state has the obligation to take enforcement actions here. And that permit is also covered by Washtenaw County. So you've got the state and Washtenaw County needing to move forward to require Gelman to do something. And I believe that it's quite clear, thanks to the good work that you all did, that this is a problem that needs to be addressed. Before, you know, it was kind of questionable, but the thorough study that you did on Allen Creek clearly demonstrates that this is a problem, and the follow-up that Dan has done here and on the two locations, West Park and Chapin, show that it's increasing in concentration. So I think there is this need to push forward, as you say, Evan, and move forward. But currently it's the state government in Washtenaw County that have the ball, because the federal government delegated that permit to you all. And the state agrees, by the way. Of course, you know, I've talked with the program managers of the MS4 permit, and they agree that they're responsible and they're trying to work through this. But it seems like after a year and a half, we would have hopefully had a little more progress.
Vince?
Yeah, I would want to recommend that we increase our testing of this. I think, you know, going for 6 months at a time is just not appropriate, given the fact that we've had tremendous increases in flow of 1,4-dioxane into this area at a very near surface groundwater exposure, with lots of homes at risk downstream of this site and upstream of this site as well. I mean, there's basement trouble in Wildwood Park that I'm totally aware of, that people have had basements replaced because of all the groundwater they're having undermining their basements. So I think we need to increase testing, and I agree with Dambick now that this really needs to be dealt with. It isn't something that can just be put off for the next 6 years and, you know, reaches 1900 or whatever. I think, you know, the city is looking at 29 part per billion as an action level. They've mentioned that today here. And I think that's also been shown in other evaluations as well.
Eric Lipson, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, thank you. I just, this question is a little bit of a tangent, but in reading the consent judgment, it indicates that if the consent judgment is signed, that all of the interveners cede all of their enforcement authority to EGLE. How does that play into this issue of all these permits? Does that just simplify it, or does that emasculate the interveners from having any say anymore in this battle that they've waged so long to be involved in?
that sounds more like an attorney question, and I think I missed my last attorney question. I got that one wrong, so I don't know if this one's one for me or.
Okay, yeah, and this is sort of it's a hypothetical question. I guess it's not real relevant at this point, so.
My understanding from the county's legal counsel is that that authority is ceded, but the right to go back to court quickly if there is evidence that it's not being done in accordance with the agreement, that option is much easier to do. It doesn't allow for a bunch of requests to go up the chain and a bunch of legal delays. I may be saying this all the incorrect way, but you're correct. I think that it cedes that authority, but really this issue we're talking about, from my perspective, is still EGLE's enforcement authority until I understand what pathway remediation and water quality have agreed to. It's not really the infrastructure owner, the agency owner's choice of which of those three pathways. Although certainly we can talk to EGLE. I would have to point out though, when we say we want immediate action for remediation, I think that's the same thing we've been asking for everywhere. And I think you all have seen what the result of the legal process has been. And I think you all have voiced your feelings and opinions on that. If you want me to spend a bunch of taxpayers' money to go down the route to get an unsatisfactory agreement, that's an option, but I'm not so sure that's the most responsible option, especially if we feel like EPA is the best path. I totally agree with Vince. We want to be staying on top of this, but I don't know that we solve this in court quickly. And I doubt that Gelman, knowing everybody's applied for EPA, is going to do anything but obfuscate in court. They've already done that without the threat of EPA.
Yeah.
I just hate to be negative, but I want to be realistic here.
Well, Can I ask then that we talked about this under old business, asking about more frequent testing, and we asked it last month. Is this something then that we should, because nothing happens fast in all of these negotiations, maybe we should put that on, this request again, that we would like more of this drain testing, and then it totally makes sense what AG Nagel said about this is not remediating the plume discharge. So this is just contamination that from their lack of remediating. So how can an NPDES permit even be considered? We're not letting them put 49 parts per billion into Honey Creek. They'd have to remediate it to discharge it into the drain down to 7.2 or anyway, my 2 cents. We have a couple more hands raised. Kathy Knoll and then Kathy Griswold.
Hello, Kathy Knoll, Scioto Township trustee. I have a question for Evan, and I think you'll be able to answer this. Do similar situations exist elsewhere in the county? For example, Scioto Township or Ann Arbor Township, that could potentially create the same situation where the plume is very close to the surface of the ground and close to basements and possibly basements that have been leaky or could be. Could you comment on that?
I don't have a full picture in my head of where the groundwater is. So I'm going to say 2 or 3 things, and then maybe Patty can chime in a little bit. So one thing is, all water in basements isn't necessarily coming from, I'll say, deeper groundwater or even regular groundwater. A lot of times water in a basement, it can be related to the rain or the snow melt at a certain time of year, and it's not really coming in contact with that contaminated aquifer. So being able to understand where approximately the surface of the groundwater is my understanding of the city's basis for their investigations and the work that EGLE has done to try to map groundwater as well. I believe in Scioto Township that the plume is quite a bit deeper than in 8th Street and West Park. I think 8th Street and West Park are the only two areas where there's a general feeling or there has been data reviewed to understand that, hey, the groundwater could be within 10 feet of basements in certain areas. Even Wildwood Park, I know Vince mentioned it, but the storm drain is in a ravine that's, I'll say 10, 12, 15 feet deep. And then it's another 5 to 10 feet down to the pipe. So now we're talking about being 20 feet below the park, below Wildwood Park. And you can just look around at where the houses are and picture that you're still quite a ways from the basements there. I don't see it in Scioto Township.
Actually, Evan, I'm going to jump in here and refer you to this portion of Scioto Township and the tributaries that are leading into Honey Creek. We have artesian wells right here. We have houses here that are along Park Road. Some of these have basements. We haven't done any investigation in this area. And yet we know the groundwater is real close to the surface because it's artesian in here.
Is it close to the surface, Roger? Or, I mean, you can have artesian conditions even when groundwater is not close to the surface. You can still have a flowing artesian.
Well, you can think of these like seeps. Do you know how deep these artesian wells are? They only sample.
I do not. I'll have to look them up.
A lot of houses near creeks that have high groundwater wells.
Yeah.
I guess the question would be, Evan, this is Dan Bicknell, whether maybe some good work as you did in the old West Park and West End area might be prudent in some of these shallower areas as well to collect some dioxane samples in the drains.
Yeah,
I don't know the lay. I don't know. I'm like you, Evan. I don't know the depth to groundwater or the depth to the sewers. So I can't make an informed projection on whether that is a possibility, but I think that's a good idea to maybe follow up on. And if that's a potential concern, it's a very small amount of money to, as you know, collect those surface water samples and analyze them for the dioxane.
I will point out that the state did do some shallow groundwater sampling along Jackson Road, which is at a higher elevation than these houses down here by the tributary. So we still don't know how far it is to groundwater in this area.
Kathy Griswold, do you need to?
I have an item that I want to put on the agenda for the next meeting, and I can wait until towards the end of the meeting if that's the appropriate time.
Yeah, that's fine. Or you can put it in the chat now.
Okay. Thank you.
So any chance we'll get more near surface testing done than as we had before? Dan Hamill or anyone else?
You remember that Dan Bicknell had his plan for shallow groundwater testing, permanent shallow groundwater testing here around the leading edge of the plume. And that's never been, we've discussed it a lot, but there hasn't been any action taken. It would require somebody ordering the company to go ahead and do this.
Right. So how does this end? How does this topic now, it just gets pushed to the next month? And like, what is the action that's going to happen?
As usual.
Well, how about more testing? How about getting commitment to do more testing frequently?
Or remediating in West Park.
Right. Absolutely.
To stop it from getting to the shallower groundwater.
Yeah. Now that this hit has gone more than double what it was last time. It's increasing rapidly.
This is yet another reason why the EPA should help us, because we can't get anything. And it shows what kind of, like Evan said, it's the polluter that did this. We can't get mad at any of each each other really, because they did this and they're in the middle of trying to negotiate deals and they don't care that their numbers are higher and that they're, I don't know. It's just mind blowing.
Same old, same old. Ralph?
I just wanted to see if I properly understand this. So maybe this will sound ignorant because you guys know a lot more than I do. But what I heard Evan and Dan say, if I got it right, is that under the consent judgment, the old one, the third one, there was some possibility that would require remediation. And if I heard right, Mr. Nagel say that was not true, that the consent judgment really didn't go there. But then I heard Dan Bicknell say, I think, that this is a federal permit that the enforcement of has been delegated to the state. If I heard that right, and we're discussing all this detail about all of this, but we're an hour and a half into a meeting and we've got a court hearing that's 3 days, that's a month from now. And what I'm curious about, what I think is really needs to be focused on in spades here, is what's going to happen at those hearings. Because, and I guess I'll ask this bluntly and maybe harshly to the EGLE representatives here, what do you intend to do about this, if anything, at that hearing? And if nothing, why not? It seems like this is just a very basic thing, that you've got a violation of a permit. You've got presumably some sort of enforcement possibility there. And you've got 3 days of court hearings where presumably the judge is going to be interested in listening to what the problems are. And so I'm curious what the strategy is here. I've heard nothing publicly from any of the interveners or the state about what these hearings are about and what the goal is and what the possibilities are. And it seems to me that's the most important thing that you've got here.
Thank you, Ralph, for transitioning us to this important topic, because that's under card update or chair updates.
Yeah, is Brian
Let's go
Nagel
right
still
into
on?
that. What's going to happen? Anybody that has any inkling of what's going to happen in those 3 days, I would like to know, because we have no clue what's going to go on into these 3+ years in the secret negotiations. We need to have some idea of what's going to happen there. Dan Hamill, you want?
I'm not going
Well, let me jump in. During the hearing that we had with Judge Connors before, the most recent one, he tossed basically a number of ideas out, and we will likely be seeking clarification from him. The order that we received from his clerk, to appear at these 3 dates, it doesn't specify in any level of detail what they're looking for. So we will be seeking clarification from Judge Connors and his court, and seek to basically figure out a way to present all the issues that we're going to address in an orderly manner.
Can I just interject there? When you say seek clarification, you mean before the hearings, right? Rather than at them?
Right, before the hearings.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to confirm
Yeah.
that, because that would make the most sense. So to be put simple from an outsider to that litigation, it's like he wants you to show up, but he didn't really tell you why, and and so you're flying completely blind at this point.
No, we're not flying blind.
I don't mean that in a pejorative way. I mean, he didn't tell you really what he wanted.
There's a number of options, the way we looked at it from our notes afterwards. So, we're talking amongst the attorneys to some degree to try to seek a format that is, propose a format basically to the judge that's going to be clear, then so that we're all on the same page instead of just, shooting in all sorts of different directions.
Brian, would it be fair to
Well, wait, Sue had her
say
hand
that,
up.
that what you all are going to have to do is provide some information that explains why the CJ was shot down by the lugs, by the local units? I mean, what is insufficient or inadequate? I mean, that type of thing. I'm wondering if this is the type of thing that might
Those
help.
are all the possibilities. It's pretty open.
Yeah, and as frustrating as this is to us, right? 49 isn't 85, and we are inside the PZ, but it's in a pipe, and it's another statute, and I don't know how that fits with the CJ, but I hope this information is at least tangential.
I'm going to try to enforce the raising hands thing here. Sue.
Hi, this is Sue Schenk. The communication that I got from our attorney, which I understand is confidential, so I'm not allowed to speak about it publicly, which is complete and utter bullshit. I will just say that because it's driving me nuts. It's impairing our ability to actually function. Was very specific about what the parties were supposed to present to the judge. Very specific. And so I am going to circle back and double check with our lawyer to make sure that I'm not allowed to talk about it. I would if I could. I will if I can. But my understanding had been that I cannot. But I will assure you it's very specific. Thank you.
Wow. There was another hand up. I can't remember who it was.
Kathy Griswold. I think Kathy Knoll had it, but she must have lowered it.
No, I can still talk.
Okay.
I wanted to say that we were not given any specific information. So I know nothing about what the hearings are supposed to do, what material might or might not be presented. At this time, I know nothing.
And there's nobody from the city to weigh in from the city's point of view?
Kathy Griswold.
Oh, Kathy. Yeah, that's Kathy.
Yeah, I don't know how much I can weigh in. I'm deeply troubled by the amount of inertia and disinformation and lack of information. And I'm still trying to get an answer to, can we amend the consent judgment? We were initially told we could not amend it, and then somehow we started to. That process alone is just mind-boggling. And what I wanted to bring up for the next meeting, but I'm going to bring it up now, and it sounds like a far-fetched conspiracy theory, but I have to keep asking, who benefits from this continued dysfunction and lack of progress? And that conspiracy theory is that if we were to connect to the Detroit water system, there would be certain community players who would benefit from that. That's more expensive to connect to the water, but if we had a crisis or no other alternative, we would have to move to the Detroit water system. And so at the next meeting, I'd like to talk about that, as well as who benefits from this dysfunction, because if powerful people would benefit from resolving this problem, I don't believe it would have dragged on the way it has. And this is not just a legal issue, but we have allowed our lawyers to control this. I mean, the very simple terms that I think of, and I'm not a lawyer, is that the tail is wagging the dog. And the tail is our legal team that keeps saying it's confidential, you can't talk about it, but just trust me. And for how many years does this have to go on? The other term that I've used is a full court press. If we were serious as a community about resolving this problem, there would be a full court press, and we would not just, and I have to say one other thing, it's like Groundhog's Day every month after month, with certain people working very, very hard, but there's this invisible power that is preventing progress. So I hope we can get to the end of it, and we've got to change the way we're doing it. But thank you to Roger and Dan. Thanks for the leadership of Jason Morgan and Sue Shink. We have so many stars, but we've got to solve the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Sue, you had your hand up. Oh, she's on the phone. Yeah, Sue.
Sorry, I was trying to call the attorney and I haven't been able to get in touch with him. But if you are, you serve for a plaintiff, I would just check in with your lawyers. I think that there may be things that they're not telling you. So, and I'm going to call Dave or call Bob Davis, our attorney, on his cell phone and try to get an answer before the end of the meeting.
Well,
Beth.
and this has gone on too long. The lawyers that I feel like are working for the polluter, I don't feel like they're representing the public in any way. I feel like they've been trying to push the CJ and sell the CJ to everybody. I'm not talking about you, Brian, or individually. I'm just saying as a group in general, I feel like the attorneys are not representing the local governments or the residents that live here. So that is very disheartening month after month after.
And if the, I'll interject something here, if the CJ was as good as everybody who's pushing it says it is, they would release all of the data and analyses that support that. The fact that that's not happening is a red flag. That by itself is enough reason to reject this whole process. There was another hand up down here. I forget who it was now. Raise it again. Ralph.
I just wanted to, I'm not going to deliver a speech, I don't think here, but I would like to ask a direct question of any of the EGLE or AG representatives here. Is there any reason that what the judge directed or said at that status conference can't be made public? That's pretty rare in my experience, even in big confidential cases, that there's sort of a gag order on what the judge tells you to do. Is there any reason? Did the judge tell you not to say, tell the lawyers you can't talk about this to the public or to your clients? That really is troubling to me. So can someone who was at that meeting, Mr. Niggle or someone else, explain that?
I'm not personally aware of any sort of gag order on our meeting or on our status conference. Status conferences are, often held in the judge's chambers, which,
yeah, I know.
So, those aren't typically, a public event. I've certainly discussed it with my clients, what went on. We would like some clarification, particularly to the process, which really wasn't set forth in the order of how we would proceed with this. But
is the order
is the order public?
Yeah, is there
yeah,
a live order in the court file? Okay. Okay. I wasn't aware of that. I was just asking questions.
Yeah. It's basically a form. Says something on the order, parties shall exchange exhibits. We don't have, and there was something about depositions, of which we don't have anything, and stuff like that.
Like
So
a pretrial order kind of thing?
Huh?
It's similar to like a pretrial order?
Yeah.
Sort of. And are you prepared to explain in any further what your read of what he wants is, and what you're I'm not going to ask you what you're prepared to do, because it seems to me like this just happened. You're still sorting it out, but is there any further light that you can shed on what the judge expects and what you expect is going to happen? Because the rest of us, if we're going to be interfacing with our representatives, our direct representatives, city council people, and to try to direct them to direct their lawyers, you have to have some idea of what's expected here. Otherwise, you really can't do anything to nudge anybody anyway. I mean, for example, is the judge expecting a potential raising of issues and bringing witnesses as to why this permit violation should be addressed? And, you know, you'd have to bring sample results and bring evidence. You have to bring witnesses and your chain of custody and all the rest of that. I mean, is that the kind of hearing that you're expecting? Or are you expecting a more general, here's where everybody is, and now let's set a, it seems to me if you've got 3 days, he's not expecting a general, you know, let's figure out our calendar and where everybody sits. He's expecting real things to, you know, little trials or hearings. Am I crazy, or is that?
It's, well, one point of clarification on the 3 days. There was a statement made that we may not need all 3 days. They were just open on the calendar. Beyond that, you know, no witnesses. You know, some of the things that were discussed was, you know, basically expert reports, scientific reports, and legal arguments. And you know, I don't want to get into the details of my notes, which may be different from the details of other lawyers' notes. And so that's, you know, this is, you know, we're still trying to like kind of, you know, wrap our heads around it and try to suggest a way that might be better to proceed than the way we came out of there.
I'd just like to interject here that one of the big concerns I have is I don't believe all of the intervening, all the people involved in negotiations have as much information as the card collective has. And without some of the information, some of the key information, some bad decisions seem to have been being made just from what we can glean from the proposed settlement. There's a whole raft of things that I listed. Not all of those were addressed because by the time I waded through all of the documents and traced down supporting information, it was past the deadline to submit to the EGLE. And so the EGLE's response so far does not include responses to all of the comments that people have had. In fact, I don't know that anybody has compiled all the comments because there was more than one place to send in the comments. Some were to the city, some to the county, you know, in preparation for these public hearings. But I don't believe anybody has compiled all the comments. And I certainly gathered what I have, but, you know, I don't have staff to go through and say, well, this comment is the same as this comment and that. So I don't even think we have a review of what the stakeholder comments have been. So there's a lot of things troubling about this, the way this whole process is working out, that it seems to be flawed from the get-go, you know, without having the public involved, public who are knowledgeable and know things about this site that apparently other people don't know.
Mike Moran has his hand up, and Evan, you had yours. Do you still want to make a comment? You've lowered it.
After Mike.
Okay.
Ralph, I just wanted to say that I have long thought and argued that the attorneys and many others are overreading this confidentiality agreement. I think far more is being treated as confidential than is required even by this very broad confidentiality agreement. So that's been a problem throughout this process. It seems to me that the stalemate we're in about this meeting really can only be approached in the way that Brian is suggesting. That's asking for clarification. Judge, what do you expect from us at this hearing? You know, it seems like the way to go to me anyway.
Thanks, Mike. Who is next?
You want me to go ahead, Beth?
So we,
Yeah, just,
oh, go ahead.
so, oh, cool screen. I didn't notice that yet. So, you know, it seems clear that the EPA option is the direction that people want to go, and the only one that seems to produce better fruit, you know, at least in everything we hear, and we've heard a lot about that. But just to keep our expectations realistic, if you go back and read, and I'm happy, I'll provide Beth again that markup that Dan has quoted from the EPA meeting in 2016. You know, they were very clear to say, we'll take public input. Dan's described what that process can be like, but they were very clear to say, we'll let you know what we decide about the remedy when we've decided the remedy. So it's very frustrating not to know what's going on. Hopefully people will have a higher level of trust for EPA coming in new, but it didn't sound like they were going to be sharing information in real time, and really not even until they were done and had a done deal. And that's absent being in court. I think they were talking about even negotiations. So, you know, we might want to spin our critical thinking lens to what are we concerned about as we move forward with EPA to make sure that CARD is laying that out on the table right off the bat when those folks come in to make sure that's clear. And I think I've passed along to Roger too. You know, we can all interpret words, so I'd like to share that with Beth, but I read a phrase that said also that they would release all the information used to make their decision. I'm hearing some words in that statement that suggest they might not release 100% of the information that they have if they feel like something wasn't used for their decision. I'm probably overthinking it, and I don't understand all of the legal gag orders.
I'm going to let Dan Bicknell reply, but I'll just point out that in the preliminary evaluation, preliminary assessment the EPA did, that was very thorough, and they did interact. You know, we had meetings with them. So I'll let Dan Bicknell reply here.
I'm sorry, I wasn't quite done, Roger, too. One thing I was going to suggest might be fruitful also, because this concern with the pipe as well as with First Sister Lake is really about where is the dioxane ending up. Let's just pause for a minute and make sure we remember if we want more cleanup, we're going to get more discharge. And it might be helpful for everybody if CARD thought about, well, where are those discharge points going to be? Where should they be? Who is okay with having a discharge next to their house? I mean, we might want to be thinking a little further forward if we're headed down that road. Where is it okay to have a discharge? I'm not sure we've found that spot yet, and it would be very helpful for this knowledgeable group to.
Dan.
Thank you, Evan. Well, I just want to have people remember that when US EPA was here, they had 4 quarterly meetings for a year. And their commitment in those meetings was to be open, honest, and provide all the information that was available. So that's their mantra. They will have a repository, electronic, just like the state has, where all the data is provided to the public. And remember also, please, that they offer a $50,000 grant for a community action group so that the public can have an independent review of what is going on the US EPA Superfund site, a technical review, an administrative review. And we don't have that here. That's very difficult. But Evan, you're right, that what's going to happen is if this becomes a US EPA Superfund site, there's going to be active restoration of that aquifer. There's not going to be the allowance of this plume to continue to migrate towards residential wells, towards Barton Pond, through the city of Ann Arbor. They're going to stop that. And that in 2016 was a very clear commitment by the Office of Superfund Director, Joan Tanaka. Additionally, they said as a first priority, they're going to extend the municipal water lines to people who may be potentially adverse impacted by the Gelman plume. That's not what's happening here. What's happening here is in the 3rd and the 4th CJ, your well has to be contaminated over the drinking water criteria before any action is going to be taken. Well, who wants to be subject to that? Who wants to be able to have the plume move towards their house, contaminate their well at 3, 4, 5, 6 parts per billion, and then not to have any action taken until it's 7.2? That's going to drive down property prices. That's going to impact people's health. People don't want to be drinking 2 or 3 parts per billion and have the government not do anything. So these are the things you're going to get with US EPA. You're going to get a proactive movement to halt the plume, restore the aquifer drinking water criteria, which is not in the cards here in this dilution remedy under state law.
Plus, you're
That's
going
the
to get
big difference.
You're going to get
Your
cost
choice
recovery.
Excuse me, Roger. Excuse me, Roger. Your choice is: are you going to continue down this path of a dilution dispersion remedy, or are you going to go on this US EPA path for active restoration of the aquifer and halting? That's the basic choice you have.
Can I say something too about, you know, they have to discharge the water somewhere, and that Evan brought up. I agree with that, and I've brought this up to Dan Bicknell before and asked him, you know, well, will the EPA come in and want to dump into First Sister Lake? And first of all, the EPA doesn't care about how much it costs for them to clean it up. They're going to make them do it the right way. They would not be able to dump into a pristine lake. They'll pipe it, probably pipe all of it now down to M14 to the river and make them treat to non-detect. And I mean, there's a million different ways for them to remediate and get rid of the water without interfering with the public. And the EPA will make them do the best practice, from what I understand. And it wouldn't be like what they're proposing now to save them money. Am I correct, Dan?
Yes, that's correct. They would, well, what should have happened in the fourth consent judgment, instead of trying to save Gelman money and put it into First Sister Lake, they should have just piped it over the 2,600 feet to the existing Gelman Central Treatment Plant, which is operating at less than half the capacity. But, you know, this is what happens when you're dealing with a polluter who's only going to give you what they think they need to give you. And as clear in the fourth consent judgment, they don't think they need to give us a lot, okay? Trying to save $350,000 to run that pipe from the Park Lake well over to the Gelman property and have that be as what they believe to be a reasonable position is absurd. The federal government is going to be able to use the Department of Justice budget and their expertise to require Gelman to do what's right. Right now, the community has spent over $1 million over 4 years and gotten really nothing. You don't want to continue down the path, in my view, of continuing to spend this large amount of money when you've got the federal government who's going to use their budget to do what's right and compel Gelman under the federal laws, which are much more strict and stringent than the state laws. So yes, Beth, they will do what's protective, and they're not going to be considering discharging something into a natural nature preserve and impacting a wetland, and Gelman asking that you sign away in the settlement agreement your rights to have this wetland mitigated. So it's day and night between what the federal government can do and what the state government can do.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Mike?
I just wanted to point out that it's been an excellent discussion, but I wanted to point out that it's 12 o'clock, and so some people may have to leave. Are there any action items or other items we need to take before we continue this this discussion?
I had asked if we were going to get more additional near surface groundwater tests, and I have not gotten a response on that.
Well, that was earlier, and we said no, they don't know. As far as the chair updates, I think everybody's seen my emails about the data and the facts. We'll be sending more stuff out once we get. We don't even have the October data yet from EGLE. and it's already December. So once we get that, I'll have some more inputs. And then shortly after that, we'll probably get the November data. University of Michigan School of Information reached out and said, you know, do you want to do another project like we did a couple of years ago? Last year, was it? And I don't have time to honcho that, but if anybody else has some ideas on that, that's open. And that's about it for what we already covered the, well, Sue, do you want to weigh in on something here?
Sorry, I just didn't want the meeting to end without me being able to convey from our attorney that I'm allowed to say that the judge set hearings in January. I have those dates so I can share them, but I don't have them handy with me right now. And the judge asked for, or during those hearings, we'll be accepting legal arguments and scientific support for measures that are not in the consent judgment that we would have liked to have had in the consent judgment. And so that's very specific to me.
Wait a minute. So who provides those? That content?
Well, I guess our lawyers, the lawyers will be the ones who are interacting at those hearings, as far as I understand, and should be reaching out for those items. But
again, that content isn't necessarily going to be made public, though, it sounds like.
So I apologize for not being better informed. I guess that makes me fit in pretty well sometimes. That those hearings, my understanding is that those hearings are for the lawyers to be communicating with the judge, and probably via written brief as well as oral discussions, and that it is not necessarily a time for the public to be communicating with the judge. However, I had also understood that the judge was going to be taking public comment at some point, and I have not been informed as to when that would be.
That's important information. Thank you. Okay.
And if Mr. Nagel has information that would contradict or expand on that, I'd be.
Yeah, I just unmuted. My thoughts all along is that this would be a normal court hearing, which is going to be open. That's all. I don't have a reason to believe that it would be another sort of closed session status conference type thing for the approach that we're taking.
3 hands went up. Mike Moran first.
Sue, was the lawyer's comment that the judge would be taking public comment at some point during these 3 days set aside for hearing, or just at some point undefined?
My understanding, well, I will just say I don't understand that those 3 days are for public comment. My understanding is that those days are set aside for interactions with the lawyers, and those will be the 11th, 12th, and 13th of January.
Yeah, that would be my expectation as well. I just thought if there was some communication that he was expecting public comment at that time, it'd be good to know.
Yeah, really.
I will follow up on that and confirm that as well.
Thank you.
But it's my understanding that it's just for the attorneys.
Sue, correct me if I'm wrong, or anybody, but from what you said, it sounds to me like what the judge is saying is all of the interveners should come to us, tell us what the problems are with this 4th consent judgment so that we can potentially improve the consent judgment if we get the input of all of the parties. Isn't that basically what he was saying?
That's my understanding, and that's why I was concerned when the other elected officials were saying that they hadn't heard about this.
Ralph, do you have something?
I have 2 comments on that. Number one, that that interpretation, although it might be real and the judge might have said it and the lawyers might have interpreted it that way, there are votes rejecting the consent judgment, period, rejecting them. So from my perspective, that's really not, that approach really doesn't make any sense, because that consent judgment is dead. It's been voted down. And I really think that you're starting essentially from a clean slate. You might say that this is what we really want, but I don't think it should be viewed necessarily. I think the lawyers should not be viewing that as, let's tweak it. They really ought to be asking their clients, I would direct this to any of the elected officials that are on this call. They should be asking you, the client, what your bottom line is, and asking for that at the court hearing, rather than using the fourth consent judgment as some sort of talisman here. And the second, and I'm not suggesting that that's necessarily what you meant, but I just wanted to clarify that. I think it really ought to be a much more open, what do you really want? What's the best bottom line? The other comment that I wanted to make relates to what Roger said, which is that I think if we're waiting for the interveners counsel to ask for input from, in terms of what I'll call the technical side, if we're waiting for them to reach out to Card or Roger or Dan Bicknell or whoever else, you might as well wait till the next century. That's not going to happen. The only way it's going to happen is that you, as the client, direct them to ask for that. If you don't tell the lawyer what to do, they're not going to do it based on the past history here. And I'm not directing that at the state representatives here, because they're, that's a whole different process. And I assume that they're, they have their direction in their own organization. But the interveners, if you want your lawyer to have that data and use it and present it, you're going to need to, I think, tell them to do that in spades, hard. That's all I have.
All right. So that's basically, I had some other things if we had more time, but I'll postpone that till a special meeting or our next meeting. Can we go on to, we just wanted to say on the, Beth, you want to cover item 6, that what happened with our EPA resolution from Card?
Yes, it passed unanimously. So that is there attached. Some people abstained, the government people that will be voting in their own bodies and staff. And that's all I got. Oh, and we can, number 7, we can wait and do next month. It was just a suggestion that we asked for that sampling for other hazardous chemicals, which is a very good point, I think, to be brought up. We're looking for 1,4-dioxane all over the place. What about other carcinogens that, chances are they were using them? And
Yeah, dimethylformamide, how much PFAS did they really use? Vince, you want to say something real quick about U of M role in the situation?
So yeah, I think we need to approach the U of M, and I'd be interested in anyone who would want to work on that. We may be able to get some faculty involvement, and to see if we can get them on board, because they're the elephant in the room. And if we can get U of M to support EPA Superfund, I think we would get us down the road quite a bit. So that's just something that we need to think about. And with the holidays coming up, it's going to be a little dicier, but that's something we need to look at going down the road here. So
yeah,
thanks much.
I've been working at that at the higher levels of U of M, just to try to plant some seeds because of Hill Auditorium. Any other critical non-agenda items that people want to bring up before we go? Jim Schultz. You have to unmute.
No.
There you go.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to Dan Bicknell for the letter that he wrote talking about the EPA, and that the EPA person from a year ago saying it would take 14 years before anything would happen. And he said that we have enough that it could happen a lot faster than that. So thank you, Dan, for what you wrote. That's it.
Yeah, I've been reading up on the citizen, what is it? Citizen Advisory Group, Citizen Action Group, whatever the EPA sets up. And I can tell you from what I've been reading that CARD is going to really speed up the setting up of that group once we go to the EPA route. So anybody else want to weigh in here before we leave?
Yeah, there was a good MLive article about the Kalamazoo River contamination that where EPA is cleaning it up, and how the city administrator of Kalamazoo said they communicate all the time, and it's been a good process, and things are getting done finally. So, I mean, I just feel we can't go down this same path again and again and again that we're doing now.
Yeah.
Can I just make one other point for those who may not have participated in this? One of the big incentives to having the EPA come in is that under the federal law, if there is a responsible party, they can make them pay. And in this case, we have a very, very
capable,
responsible and solvent, more important, solvent. That is, they're in business. They haven't gone out of business and left this as an orphan site. So that's why the EPA loves these kinds of things, because they can actually make money on them, or they can not lose money. So that's another important thing to remember, and that's why Danaher is fighting it, or one of the reasons I assume they're fighting it so hard, is they're going to have to actually start shelling out real money that other people are going to dictate. They're not going to dictate the terms of the cleanup. Someone else is going to do it and then bill them. So.
Well, plus the company can actually make money on this because of what they learned from this very extensive dioxane site, the largest one of its type in the country. Just like U of M involved.
You're saying they could.
Well, they can come up with technology over the decades it's going to take to clean this up, and they'll figure out how to do it, more cheaply and safer. They just need the incentive to push in that direction. I've seen this with Gelman.
It's a crazy irony.
Yeah, EPA will learn a lot too, because this is a 1,4-dioxane site with not many other contaminants, and they, in some ways, would be behooved them to pick this site like they did White Lake and use it as a way to handle 1,4-dioxane, because they're finding it all over the place. It's
a no-brainer.
It's very ubiquitous.
All right. Any last minute things? Otherwise, I'm going to go get some lunch. Stop sharing, I guess, here.
Thank you.
Thanks for setting it up.
All right.
Yes, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. There's some hot news. We may have some.
Thanks, everyone.
We may have a meeting before January. We may have some kind of break meeting here going on. So.
Yeah, that might be good, because, yeah, maybe, I mean, it sounds to me like these 3 days could be hearings, and I think we should try to be prepared and try to get stuff to the lawyers of what we want our lawyers to present to the judge.
Well, again, I think if we just had a compilation of all of the responses, so each of the elected officials who have the compilation, from their own compilation, if we could get together and share that, and maybe have volunteers or staff go through it and pick out all of the concerns that people had and tally them up and compare it with what the initial response is from EGLE, and get that out, and then we can work from that to feed what's important to the lawyers before the January meeting. That's something that'd be a good use of our time between now and then. So
Could somebody find out if there will be a Zoom link the public can watch those hearings?
well,
I can try and find out.
Thank you.
thank goodness for Zoom, huh? All right. Goodbye, everybody. Have a good
And thanks to Beth for being the secretary and helping out with the meetings.
Thank
been
you.
working so hard on this. Thank you, Beth. Everybody, thanks for coming and thanks for weighing in and paying attention because
All
that's
you elected. Yeah.
yeah. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Roger.
Bye.
Bye.
And Dan, thank you, Dan.
All the electeds. Thank you.
Do we know who was on those phone calls?
Yes, Jillian Carey was one, and I think my friend Linda Burrauer was the
Okay.
other.
So you got all the attendance done. That's good.
Yeah, I got all the attendance.
I'm impressed because with what do we have, like 30 some people or something like that?
Yeah, 35 again, I think.
Yeah, this is I think I can go
Oh.
up to 100 with my Zoom account. I got to renew that sometime.
Thanks, you guys.
I guess.
Thank you, Beth.
Bye.
Good to see everybody.